My name is Joy Burkhard, and I'm the founder and director of the California Maternal Mental Health Collaborative, also known as 2020 Mom, and we'll talk a little bit about the name change later on today, but welcome. First, I wanted to welcome a few special guests. There's a lot of you here, but a few people in particular we wanted to call out, and I hope that they're all here. But Miriam from the March of Dimes, the California chapter. Hi, Miriam. We're glad that you're here. We also wanted to welcome Marlene and Lauren from the Central Valley Health Policy Institute, who we're going to be doing some really great project work with later. You'll hear about that. Is Bryn here from the Pacific Business Group on Health? I think Bryn might be coming a little bit later. Christine Morton from the CMQCC, also the California Maternal Quality Care Collaborative. I know Christine is here. She's also hosting a session on suicide during the lunch break. It's limited seating, so if you're interested in that breakout, please go back to the registration area at the break and make sure you sign up. It's first come, first serve. And then, of course, I need to say hello and a special warm welcome to our friends and colleagues at Cigna. So if you all could raise your hands or stand up. Cigna has been sponsoring this event for us really since our inception. So we really couldn't do it without Cigna's financial contribution, and also much of our thinking comes from our connections at Cigna as well. So we're grateful for Cigna. We also wanted to welcome our remote sites. So this forum is the first forum that we are doing a webcast to several remote sites, and there's also about 30 individuals or so across the U.S. that are watching us right now. So I'm going to say hello for all of you because they can't see you, but we're glad that you're with us, and I'm just going to give them a quick call out. We have Stacy with Umbrella in Las Vegas, so she's got a group with her in Las Vegas. Mandy with the Colorado Department of Public Health in Denver has a nice sized group there. There's a private invitation-only session that's happening in San Diego with Gretchen at Postpartum Health Alliance, and we're excited to see what comes out of that group. They're going to have some of their own breakout sessions. And then Paula with the California Department of Public Health in Sacramento also has a group of public health staff meeting with them in their office. So welcome everyone in the room and out there. So all of our materials for today's programs are on our website already on the path here at the bottom, californiamaternalmentalhealth.org forum_materials, and we'll make sure we get that out through our e-newsletter later if you're not able to write it down. So a little bit about us, the California Maternal Mental Health Collaborative, also known as 2020 Mom. We were formed in 2011 at the urging of the state legislature through a resolution. It was called ACR 105, and it declared the month of May Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month in California, and we also worked with Postpartum Support International to declare the month of May Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month internationally. So we want you to know about May and think about ways that you can start promoting this important topic in your own communities and own organizations. And this is our new mission statement, which was just approved a few weeks ago by the board of directors that you heard from just a moment ago. And it says, we promote the mental health of women before, during, and after pregnancy by addressing barriers and advancing best practices so women and their families can thrive. That's us. I'm now have the pleasure of welcoming two friends and members of our organization, Inner Circle members, Diana Barnes and Peck Indman. Let me tell you a little bit about these amazing women. You can see up on the screen that they're both authors. And let me start with Diana Barnes, who has become a dear friend, I must say, lives here locally in Los Angeles and a great supporter of our work. So Diana Barnes is an internationally recognized expert in maternal mental health and a former president of Postpartum Support International. Mentioned that she's an author, and she's also just recently had another book come out, and there's a flyer in your packets that describes her book, and it's called Women's Reproductive Mental Health Across the Lifespan. So Diana, we're so glad you're here. And Peck Indman, let me introduce Peck, who is also a great supporter of our work, and these two have been with us doing this presentation in the past and by our sides always, so we appreciate you. Peck is the current director of Regroup Therapy, which is an amazing new platform for maternal mental health support groups online. So something we want to encourage more of, and we're excited about that telemedicine option. She has co-authored an award-winning book, Beyond the Blues, which is up here, and has also been on the board of Postpartum Support International for a number of years, and is one of their key trainers in their program. The most interesting thing about Peck, and she'll talk about it, is that she is like a scuba diver extraordinaire, and she wears fish jewelry, and she incorporates fish into her presentation. So I'm sure we're going to see some fish, or we may not see fish today, but you'll talk about fish, I'm sure. Very good. Well, ladies,
good morning. You know, I know many of us in this room come to this work with our own very personal stories. And my own interest in women's reproductive mental health dates back more than 22 years. After my second child, my daughter was born. And within hours of her birth, I was gripped by anxiety that became so intolerable and paralyzing. Within the first year of her life, I was hospitalized 4 different times, and with extended hospitalizations of 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I never even heard the word postpartum depression until the first birthday. By that time, however, I was in such a fragile emotional and physical state and psychological state that I continued to relapse and was in and out of the hospital for the next 2 years. And in 1992, when my daughter was born, the idea of a woman's risks and her vulnerability to mood-related illness in the peripartum was never discussed. It was never even considered, and certainly never mentioned during pregnancy, which at that time was believed to be protective against depression and anxiety. We know differently now. And thank goodness that we have come as far as we come. We have a lot more to do, but we now know that there is no more vulnerable time in the life of a woman than during her reproductive years. In fact, all of the research indicates that there are more psychiatric admissions around the childbearing years than at any other time in the female life cycle. We also now know that postpartum depression is the most common complication of pregnancy. Nationally, 800,000 to 1 million women each year will experience some form of maternal depression. And in California alone, there are approximately 500,000 live births each year. And given the current prevalence rates for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, we can expect that about 50 to 75,000 of these women will experience some form of maternal illness. And way too often, because of misinformation or lack of resources, they will suffer silently and in shame. We know that maternal depression can affect any woman, regardless of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic, or educational level. And if we don't recognize it, as in my case, if we don't recognize it, we cannot treat these reproductive illnesses that are so very treatable, and in any number of cases now preventable, through identification during pregnancy, proper planning as part of regular prenatal care, and follow-up postpartum. Educating women and their families, educating all healthcare providers about risk factors and symptom presentation is absolutely key to reducing the numbers of women whose lives are irreparably impacted by maternal depression and whose children are at grave risk for potentially lifelong cognitive, social, emotional, and psychological challenges. When we don't treat perinatal depression and anxiety, untreated illness reverberates throughout the family system, affecting not only the mother, but father, children, and fathers, we know, can experience depression as well. The diagnosis of maternal depression is far more complex than one might think, but the research on this illness is very clear. The time between conception and the first year postpartum is the period of greatest vulnerability for perinatal illness. Pregnancy is not protective against depression, even though we have all of these wonderful myths that pregnancy is blissful, and for many women it is, but for some it's not. The most significant predictor of maternal depression postpartum is an untreated mood or anxiety during pregnancy, and in most cases, the symptoms of a postpartum depression begin to slowly reveal themselves in the last trimester of pregnancy and are too often confused with pregnancy-related symptoms, so they go unnoticed or overlooked. Untreated mood disorders during pregnancy significantly raise the risk for miscarriage, prematurity, low birth weight, organ malformation, preeclampsia, placental abruption, and childhood behavioral and emotional disturbances as much as 4 years following the birth of that child. Mothers who experience a mood or anxiety disorder during one pregnancy are 50 to 75% more likely to suffer an even more severe recurrence in a subsequent pregnancy. They're more likely to abuse substances to medicate their depression or anxiety. They're less likely to seek regular and consistent prenatal care, and in some cases, they're even more willing to begin to think about terminating their pregnancies in the hopes that they will relieve the distress caused by their symptoms. Most women with maternal depression will be enveloped by paralyzing worry and anxiety more than the symptoms of depression, and that leads them to believe that they're not experiencing postpartum depression at all, and so they're less likely to ask for help. 3 to 5% of new mothers will be consumed by relentlessly intruding thoughts and images that lead to compulsive behaviors that ultimately interfere with their capacity to care and mother their new infants. 10% of new mothers will be affected by intense panic that is often severe enough to awaken them from a deep sleep and frequently sends them to the emergency room thinking they're having a heart attack. Women with early histories of trauma may perceive the act of giving birth as a re-traumatizing event. And even the birth experience itself may feel traumatic for some women, depending on the nature of the events surrounding labor and delivery. Maternal depression distorts thinking, it impairs judgment and decision-making. Consequently, a mother's ability to be attuned to the needs of her infant may be severely compromised. Attachment is disrupted, and because of this, infants are so much more vulnerable to child abuse and neglect. Postpartum psychosis is a separate condition from postpartum depression, and although it's rare, it can occur in about 1 or 2 out of every 1,000 women who give birth. It is a potentially life-threatening disorder that requires immediate medical attention, and as a frequent consultant to legal counsel on cases of infanticide, pregnancy denial, neonaticide, I've been witness to the horrific tragedies that occur when psychosis is overlooked or inadequately treated. The rates of infanticide for women with postpartum psychosis are 4%, and suicide is 5%. The research on infanticide actually indicates that 40% of women with postpartum psychosis saw a healthcare provider within 24 to 48 hours of the unthinkable happening. And that tells us a lot, doesn't it? Tells us that we need to continue to educate and increase awareness about these potentially devastating illnesses. Today, I believe we have much better understanding that the foundation of a woman's reproductive mental health begins many years before pregnancy is even contemplated, and that a woman's experience of motherhood is embedded in the fabric of her reproductive life and exists not as a series of isolated events, but as a continuum across her lifespan. We do not have to wait until a woman gives birth before we can offer help that will enable her to get well, in many cases prevent the onset of perinatal depression, and in most cases we can begin to screen even before conception. Thank you.
Yes, I am a fish nerd. And I do have fish pictures, but I'm not doing a slide presentation. But if you'd like to see them, please feel free to come up and ask me. Fish therapy is highly efficacious. People feel better when they look at fish pictures. I came to this work from a different route. I grew up not too far from here, near the beach, in a pretty politically activist family. And I grew up in the era of feminism and human rights, and I trained as a family practice physician assistant and got a degree in counseling and health psychology and a doctorate in counseling. And it was at that time I saw a flyer about postpartum depression. And I was horrified that after all those years of training, no one had mentioned any kind of issue related to women's mental health, in particular around maternity. And I jumped in and I called the number on the flyer and ended up meeting Diana and Jane Honickman and We've been on this journey for over 20 years. And what's so striking to me about all the things Diana talked about is that, it doesn't happen magically, that screening can begin way before a woman even gets pregnant or begins to think about pregnancy. We're so missing the boat. And as a diver, you never want to miss the dive, but let me tell you that. So screening, you can't tell by looking. And that's a myth. And a lot of what we do is myth busting. You can't tell by looking. There are tools that aid in diagnosis, in screening, and in progress of treatment. Is what we're doing effective? Is this woman really getting better? So we use screening in so many ways. We screen women for diabetes. We screen for high blood pressure. We screen for weight. We screen babies for growth and development. And so screening, we know, improves detection. What do you do with that? Well, screening can be done. There are free screening tools in multiple languages. Screening can be done by OBs. It can be done by midwives, by other health providers. It can be done over the phone. It can be done over the internet. And then what you need is resources. And so what we're asking providers to do is have resources. And what that means, in my mind, is we need a trained person on every street corner. Somebody who can screen, somebody who can do a good assessment, and someone who can treat. Those are all not necessarily the same person. So we need to educate healthcare providers to screen. We need to train them how to refer and offer resources. And we need to make sure women get to those resources. And I think, again, there's a lot of mythology about what is treatment. Treatment doesn't equal medication always. And I think there's a lot of fear and shame and guilt and barriers because of ignorance about what is treatment. When people call me, I'm very clear about the model of psychotherapy I use. I say I do talk therapy, and I don't sit there and say, how did that make you feel? That would make me angry. And people are often very relieved because that's the stereotype of therapy. So part of the whole screening and education process is about education about what are kinds of treatments. And we also need to know that medications are very low risk, and even the American Journal of Psychiatry in 2012, and this is about how far we've come really, says that there is considerable evidence that the decision not to prescribe antidepressants to a woman who is depressed or likely to have a reoccurrence of depression may generate greater risks to the woman and her fetus than the risk of exposure to the medications. We have a lot of myth busting still to do. Thanks to the media, it's been a blessing and a curse. And even now the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we're talking about, two big clubs here. The American College of OBGYNs has come out and talked about treatment during pregnancy and with lactation. The American Academy of Pediatrics has reiterated what Diana has so nicely said about postpartum depression leads to increased costs of medical care, inappropriate medical care, child abuse, neglect, discontinuation of breastfeeding. We know moms who are depressed or anxious or who have OCD are less likely to begin nursing or giving breast milk to their babies, and they're less likely to continue. And it also, maternal illness affects child's brain development, and we're going to hear about that, and I'm really excited about today's presentations. So I think the other thing we really need to look about and think about today is what gets in the way of women getting to help. I mean, certainly many articles now say, see your healthcare provider, and unfortunately that we need to train the healthcare providers. But there are costs of treatment. We need to work on making healthcare accessible to all people. As Diana mentioned, dads get postpartum depression, anxiety, and suffer as well. Limited time. Who's going to take care of other family members? Who can take time off work? Who's going to watch other children? Loss of pay. Who's going to, you may have to take unpaid time off. Poor access. Boy, I grew up here, but driving around LA now scares the heebie-jeebies out of me. Oh my God. So poor access, poor transportation. I was shocked when my friend said there was a subway now in LA. There's a subway here? I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. We don't have very good public transit. Childcare, and again, that provider ignorance. I'm sure any of you therapists in the room or providers have heard ridiculous things, I'm going to be judgmental here, that other healthcare providers have told people that, is not evidence-based information. The illness itself gets in the way of getting treated. If you've got depression, and you've got those dark glasses on, the key words of depression are helpless and hopeless. So what hope is there? Or you're told it's normal. It's the blues, honey. You'll get over it. Get your nails done. Social, we still hear that. Someone 3 months postpartum was told it's the blues. Well, by definition, it's not the blues anymore. So social stigma, there still is that embarrassment. Every other mom is glowing and so happy with her baby. What the heck is wrong with me? Why don't I feel happy? Or, as Diana mentioned, not identifying. I feel anxious. I'm worried all the time. I'm not depressed. So I must not have that PPD, postpartum depression. And again, the lack of information, lack of resources, and incorrect information. There's still that media. And there may be opposition to treatment. Family members may say, don't air your laundry, or don't talk about it, or, you can't, you need to see an alternative provider who, again, may or may not, just as anyone else, may be informed. Racism certainly increases the risks of risk. We know women who have poor access to care have more trouble finding care. We know that it limits economic opportunity, limits access to social resources, and limits exposure to dangerous work and living environments. You can't just say go out for a walk if your neighborhood is really unsafe. So you really have to think about where each woman is coming from. And poverty certainly limits access and increases risks. So we're here for a wonderful day. Every time we do something like this, it's, part of us, or part of me, I'll take responsibility, says, we've got such a long way to go. But when we come to places like this, I think, as Diana said, we really feel we've really made some headway and some progress. So thank you for all being part of the solution.
I am so excited that I have the honor to introduce Reverend Pilar Maat Grant to us today. I first want to just take a moment and explain how I met her. I have the honor of training the Welcome Baby home visitors, and she was at a training, and we were talking about trauma, and she said, I think I have a story, and I think I'm ready to share it. So this is a follow-up to that. Let me tell you a little bit about the extraordinary human being that we have with us today. She has a website and an organization called Birth Mama, and if you want to look it up, it's birthmama.org. She is a doula, has assisted women with nutritional health, wellness, maternal depression, and lactation consulting for over 25 years. She has 7 children. Can I say that again? Wow! And 1 granddaughter. So she's had many opportunities to do it right the next time. She's a professionally trained herbologist, a massage therapist, a doula, a peer counselor, an aquanatal instructor, and she does yoga for positive health and rites of passage facilitator, which I'm going to learn about as soon as we're done here. And she is actually studying to get a doctorate in metaphysical psychotherapy. And if that weren't enough, she works as a parent coach with Welcome Baby at Northridge Hospital. But the most important thing is that she's a belly dancer. So I am going to introduce Pilar.
I also just want to say, anytime a woman steps up and tells her story, she opens up the opportunity for all of us to feel connected and supported, and the bravery of telling a story is not to be underestimated. So please receive her with the warmth that she deserves.
Greetings, everyone. Again, my name is Pilar, or some people know me by my aunt. And thank you, Gabrielle, for introducing me. And this is my story. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, around 1965. That's when I was born. And I grew up in a household where it was like a matriarch. My grandmother was the boss. Everybody knew she was the boss. And when I was 10 years old, so we're in 75 now, when I was 10 years old, I had a 17-year-old cousin who became pregnant. And my grandmother said that every girl in the family would know how to take care of children. And so we did. She taught us how to change diapers, and at that time it was cloth diapers. So we did cloth diapers. My cousin decided not to breastfeed, unfortunately, so we all learned how to make bottles, make sure they were warm, and they were the glass bottles, no plastic bottles. So some people in the room know what I'm talking about. Everything dealing with babies and children and toddlers, my grandmother taught us, and we all learned it because we had to. So when I was 11, everybody started to trust me in the neighborhood with their children. I don't know why. I grew up in extreme poverty, so we lived in what was called the brickyard. The brickyard was, I guess out here they would call them projects. So the brickyard was a project, government project. And so a lot of teenagers had babies. And I would be the one who would charge them $2, $1 to watch their baby while they went and had fun. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So I went to college at Grambling State University, and I was in nursing school. While in nursing school, I met my first husband, and we married when I was a senior in nursing school, and then shortly after marriage, I had my son and my first baby. After I had my baby, well, let me go back a little bit. In nursing school, I thought I was an expert on birth. Because I went through the OBGYN and Peds rotation. Those who are nurses know what I'm talking about. I went through the rotation, and I studied and I studied, and I learned everything. And I was actually 5 months pregnant when I went through that rotation. So I thought I knew everything. And one thing I learned is that I didn't want to do it like I saw it. So I wanted something different. And I saw a lot of women suffering in labor, and no one was there to help them. So I started studying what else could be done in labor. So I decided to do it natural. So I got a Le Mans teacher, I found somebody in the neighborhood, and I was in Louisiana in a small town called Grambling. The hospital was 5 miles away in another small town called Ruston. So everything was very, very small. If you can imagine dirt roads and all of that, yes. And it's still pretty much the same today. So I decided to get a Le Mans teacher, found her. She was a pharmacist, and she taught Le Mans. It was 5 of us in the class, and she said, okay, there's 5 of you here. 4 of you are going to have C-sections. 1 of you are going to have your baby natural. And she said, so who's going to have the baby natural? I was 21, and I was the youngest person in the room, the only African American in the room, and nobody believed me. They all laughed, just as you did. But I was determined. So I continued to get, all the information I could, and I went into labor, and I had my baby natural, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, and the doctor didn't make it because he was doing a C-section, and I said I had to push, and everybody was like, yeah, you don't know, honey. Well, just hold it, you don't know what you're talking about. And the nurse ended up catching the baby because I wasn't waiting for the doctor. So I had my baby, everything was wonderful. I did hemorrhage, so my iron was very low, I fainted, all that good stuff, but I didn't care because I had this beautiful baby and I did it natural, and I did breastfeed. I get home 3 days later, and everything seems to be going good, and all of a sudden, it hit me. I was walking with my baby. I took him to the room. I set up a crib and everything, but I was never taught to let the baby sleep alone. My grandmother taught me babies should sleep with you. They remember to breathe, they remember your heartbeat, all of that. They live when they sleep with you. So I just did the crib so my friends could come over and go, oh, so cute. Oh, you chose this color. So not necessarily for the baby. But I walked into his room and I looked at the crib and he was asleep, and I just put him in the crib and I started crying. And I started crying hysterically, and I couldn't stop. And I had no clue what was going on. Doing all the research that I did, I never read anything about maternal depression, postpartum depression, baby blues, none of it. Even in nursing school, I had no clue. So this was in 1988. I had no clue about any of it. So I didn't know what was happening to me. All of a sudden, I have this gut feeling and this burning in my gut that something happened to me that I couldn't understand. And I didn't want to hold the baby. I was looking at my husband and he said, why are you crying? I said, I don't know. I don't know why I'm crying. I don't understand. I'm looking at this baby. I love him. I'm breastfeeding him. I'm doing all this, but now I don't want to touch him. Yes, I know I do want to touch him. No, I don't. I don't know what I want to do, but I need to talk to my mother. So I called my mom and I said, what happened to me? She said, what do you mean? What happened to me when I was a baby? Something happened. I can feel it. I know it because I'm looking at my baby and I don't want to touch this baby, but I love him and I do want to touch him and I want him to love me and I want him to know how much I love him, but I can't do it. Help me. And she said, all you need to know is that I love you. That's all you need to know. And I said, no, it's more than that. Something happened. Please tell me. Click. I hung up. I called my aunt. Tell me, you told me that you named me. Why didn't my mother name me? I need to know why you named me and not my mother. And she said, I can't tell you. No, you have to tell me because I can't go on. And you're not coming to take care of me. My mom's not here. I'm isolated. So the feelings of isolation, anxiety, the depression was in, and it hit me so hard I had no clue what it was at the time. But I'm going on and I'm begging my aunt, please, please, please tell me what happened. And then finally she said, yes, I named you. Why? Why? Why not my mother? Why didn't my mother name me? What happened? You were born, you were very sick. Sick how? You had a severe kidney infection. Okay, keep telling me. What else happened? Because I can feel it. I can't go on with my baby until you tell me. And she said, you had a severe kidney infection. Your mom went home. Your mom was okay, they thought. So they let her go home. I went to the hospital every day and I took care of you. You had your right side of your head was shaven. You had IVs in your head to treat the kidney infection, and you were very sick, and you were very, very sick. Your mom goes home, but she refused to go back to the hospital and take care of you. When I went to the hospital the next day, you had no name or anything. The nurses told me I had to name you. So I named you Pilar Vernique because I was reading a French novel, and that was the main character in the French novel. Yay, Auntie, it's a great name. So she's talking to me and I'm starting to, the anxiety is kind of going away because now I'm starting to understand what happened to me. So she says, okay, and then after that, after your mom wouldn't come, she said, when we finally got you home, your mom couldn't take care of you. Why? What was wrong with my mother? She was sick. What do you mean sick? Well, my aunt, like me, had never heard of postpartum depression. So she didn't know what name to give it. She just said that she was very, very sick. Your grandmother took care of her for 6 weeks. And for 6 weeks, I was 5 months pregnant, 6 months pregnant, and I took care of you because your mother couldn't. What about breast milk? Well, we tried to get her to give you some, to pump some out for you, but mainly she wouldn't touch you for 6 weeks. And my grandmother took care of her for 6 weeks. So all the confusion, everything started to make sense. It started to make sense. All the years I didn't have a connection with my mother started to make sense. I never knew why I felt that she treated my sister better than me. I never knew why I couldn't connect with her the way I wanted to. I never knew I had trauma at birth until that moment when my aunt told me. And then my aunt went further and she said, your mom had severe trauma when she was pregnant with you. Your mom was depressed when she got back from Boston 2 weeks before you were born. She was already there. She was already gone. She said your mom got off the bus and it looked as if she just had a blank face. We didn't know what was happening with your mother. So a little story, backstory, because you have to know it. just so you can understand that sometimes women don't know that they had trauma, but when it comes to postpartum depression, birth can bring it up. And when it brings it up, it's sudden and you don't know, but it's a feeling. It's something that hits you inside like nothing that you've ever felt before. And I also felt like I had like a cloak or something over me that was holding me back. I see this beautiful baby, but I don't. I love him, but then I don't. It's hard to explain until you actually go through it. Backstory really quick. My father met my mom. My mom was 16. My father was 30. My mom immediately got pregnant with my sister, and my sister and I are 18 months apart. My mom, after she had my sister, my dad goes to prison, and she moves to Boston with him, and then he goes to prison while she's pregnant with me. And then I'm born. By the time I was born, they said right before I was born, before my mom left to come back to Birmingham, she was threatened because we found out my father was a pimp. And she was threatened by 20 women that he moved her in the house with to be there. They were supposed to help take care of me and my sister, but no, they threatened to kill my mom. And when he went to prison, the threats got bigger until someone came and took my mom out of the house. We sent her to a halfway house. At this time, she's 17. And then they sent her to the halfway house. A man who works at the halfway house tries to rape my mom while she's pregnant with me. And then 2 weeks before I was born, she finally gets enough money, gets a ticket from Boston, Greyhound bus, and makes it back to Birmingham, Alabama. Severe, severe trauma in pregnancy. Severe, severe trauma for a baby in utero. So all of this, I had no clue. It was the biggest secret ever held in our family until I had my first baby. And it all came up and it hit me like a lightning bolt. And that's my story.